in a live stream now.
Perfect. All right. Are we good?
We're good.
Awesome. Hello and welcome to today's council meeting. Before we begin, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us by Zoom and members of the public for watching the live stream on YouTube. We had hoped to continue our meetings in person, but it's the safest option for now. Hopefully we can get back to seeing each other in person at our November meeting. We have a new council member joining today. Elaine Walker was appointed by Governor Beshear on July 30th. And you might remember her from her days as the Secretary of State, the Commissioner of Parks, or as the 29th Mayor of Bowling Green. She brings a wealth of knowledge to her role, and I'm pleased to welcome her today. Do I see Elaine?
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Excellent. Franklin County Judge Executive Houston Wells, I believe, is back with us. Heather, do we have Judge Wells?
I do not see him just yet. We may have to come back to that.
He's on the screen. I see
I do
Judge
see him.
Wells.
There he is.
Hey,
Yes.
Dr.
Thompson.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
So Franklin County Judge Executive Houston Wells is back with us today to perform the oath of office for Ms. Walker. But before we do that, Heather, would you call the roll?
I will. Dr. Mohammed Barber.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello. Mr. Beal.
Here.
Mr. Colby Burks. He messaged me, said he's going to be about 15 minutes late. He has class until 10:15.
Very important.
Mr. Eric Ferris.
Here.
Miss Lori Harper.
Here.
Miss Karen Hoover. There she is. I see her. Chair Lucas Menzer.
Here.
Mr. Richard Nelson.
Here.
Miss Vidya Ravichandran.
Here.
Mr. Madison Silvert.
Here.
Dr. Robert Stack.
Here.
Miss Elaine Walker.
Here.
Mr. Kevin Weaver. Miss Carol Wright. And Commissioner Glass. He is in a meeting at 10 o'clock, but will be joining us shortly. All right, you have quorum.
Thank you, Heather. Now we'll turn it over to Judge Wells to perform the oath of office.
Good morning, everybody. And congratulations, Ms. Walker, for your appointment to this board. And so, Elaine, or Ms. Walker, if I can see you, if you would raise your right hand and then listen to the oath and answer the oath at the end. Are you there, Ms. Walker?
I am here, Judge.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good to see you and congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Do you solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this Commonwealth and be faithful and true to the Commonwealth of Kentucky, so long as you continue a citizen thereof, and that you will faithfully execute to the best of your ability the office of member of the Council on Post-Secondary Education according to law? And do you further solemnly swear that since the adoption of the present Constitution, you, being a citizen of this state, have not fought a duel with deadly weapons within this state nor out of it? Nor have you sent or accepted a challenge to fight a duel with deadly weapons, nor have you acted as a second in carrying a challenge, nor aided or assisted any person thus offending, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you and congratulations, and God bless you, and thank you for your service. And by the way, Dr. Thompson, hello, we miss you, and thank you for what you're doing to help us in our community. God bless all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor. Elaine, would you like to say a few words and introduce yourself to the council?
Well, most of the information was contained in the introduction. One of the things that was not mentioned is that my husband and I have an independent film production company, which is a little less active than it was when we first moved to Kentucky. We actually chose Bowling Green from Los Angeles. We looked all across the nation searching for a better place to raise our two children, who were 8.5 and 11 at the time, and literally went from the Northeast to the Southeast to the Northwest and the Southwest, and found Bowling Green, moved here in '93, and have been thrilled every single day that we have been here. It has been a wonderful experience to raise a family. We have been very involved in film production, very involved with KETCH, who has aired a number of our independent documentaries. And I'm just thrilled to be part of this organization. I was very honored by the governor's appointment, and I hope that I can make some meaningful contributions.
Excellent. Well, welcome. We're very happy to have you.
So
Thank
happy
you.
to have you on board.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. The minutes from our June 25th meeting are in onboard. Are there any objections to those as presented? If none, they are approved as distributed. Okay, next up, President Thompson, your written report is in the agenda materials, but is there anything you'd like to add to highlight at this time?
A few things. Normally I keep this fairly short and I'll make it fast, but there's a lot of stuff going on, as you all know. And as I report to the executive committee, I will give a little longer report today. We had a special session, and you know we did. Let me tell you kind of what came out of the special session fairly quickly. Happy to answer any questions, or we got people on here that would, like Eric Paris, that probably knows it well, even more in detail. But basically 4 bills came out of the special session that the governor called. It was really called to figure out how to spend some of the federal dollars that we have received that, as you know, last year, the House and the Senate got a little bit more control of. So Senate Bill 1 came out that removes the mandates, the mask mandates, and provides flexibility around instructional days related requirements. It adds test to stay model for schools, basically makes it easier for retired teachers to aid in teacher shortages and stabilizes school funding through the average days of attendances to revert back to the past years of the way that they had been doing business. Senate Bill 2 encourages universities to develop and initiate public awareness campaigns to get people vaccinated. We thought this might be coming. I had worked with a few of the folks on the Senate side to figure out what are some of the things that we could do to encourage more people to get vaccinated, where we can keep the schools open again. As you all know, we're open face to face. We do have a mask mandate on our college campuses, but we're in full order. Senate Bill 3 directs the ARP funds to be used to implement Senate Bill 1 and 2. And Senate Bill 5 directs funds to KCTCS for job training through the Bluegrass Skills Corp and the KCTCS trains, and provides funds to build a KCTCS training center. This is designed to help economic development, get people to our state trained up, to help people like Ron Beal even get more people in his organization or in his firm to keep up with the great demands that are still out there for businesses such as manufacturing. That's, you know, Eric or anyone else, I'm not sure you want to add more to that or not, but that's the quick update from the special session. Some other things going on, you know, KSU, we talked a little bit about that. We're going through a financial assessment now. You know, the governor gave an executive order that put CPE in a co-responsible role, if you will, with the board at KSU to really get them back to square one. We do know there are deep issues around finances. I think we have the interim president here today to talk to us a little bit about that, along with Greg Rush. But we hired Susan Krause to work with our general counsel, Travis Powell and Bill Payne, and all of them to triple check. Not that we don't trust Greg about what's going on with finances. We just want to make sure that we are leaving no holes unfilled, if you will. So we're double checking all of the items around finances. It looks like it's going to be upward past a $15 million possible ask to get us back to square one. That's not the strategic investments that are needed, but we're also are working heavily. I'm interviewing a lot of the campus constituency over the next few days to figure out how we can organizationally build back a strong, thriving campus for the future, and how we can look at the cultural items that can help that needed campus. Let me tell you, let me be clear about this. I think KSU should remain an independent HBCU and should be those strong for this state and for this nation. And to do that, we will have to do things organizationally different. To do that, we have to do things financially different. To do that, we have to do some things culturally different even. But that doesn't mean that you get away from the base idea of what it was here to serve, but add more to that about how we can serve a greater need, if you will, for the state. You know, we will have coming up after this session a huge session around board involvement, how they can look at being more engaged with the campus. So, you know, Kentucky was selected with a grant. We were the only state selected to work with John Gardner Institute and Association of Governing Boards to look at how we can build a prototype of good governance for the nation and how they can use that to do this. This is the first of a kind 3.5-year called Equity and Student Success Project. And so we have a lot of people signed up for the first session even. So over the next 3 years, you'll get an opportunity to get engaged yourself as well as others. And so that is taking place. Melissa Bell, Lee Nimitz, and a few of her folks inside are kind of running that item. And I don't know if you're signed up for it, but please feel free to do so. The next session's coming up if you didn't do it this time. I've testified a few times already. A couple of things were canceled because of the special session, but testified in front of the Capital Planning Advisory Board, basically laying out the needs for our campuses, as well as some of the things that we may be looking at within CPE, as Vidya and I talked about earlier, building out a portal technology that would allow students to have a one-stop shop, if you will, to make sure that they move toward their goals of being educated. And so that was presented to that Capital Planning Board. We are, as the chair of the Finance Committee will tell you, CPE will be pushing hard along the lines of asking for money for deferred maintenance. We have about a $7.5 billion need in this state for our state-owned buildings on our campuses that are just falling down. I mean, you'll hear from KSU just how bad the deferred maintenance needs are, I'm sure. But we will be pushing about 10% of that to be funded in a bond sort of way. So we'll probably be asking the Finance Committee and the board to approve a $350 million per year fund pool that's bonded, by the way. That's not really $350 million in hand at the time, to be matched with the campuses. So $350 million a year gets us to about 10% of the needed items that we have. In the past, we haven't got funded very well in this area, and because of that, we are getting in worse shape. At $7.5 million is growing every day, if you will. I also had a chance to present to the State Commission on Race and Access to Opportunity, and pointing out that, you know, I call the trifecta, the triangulated way that we do our performance funding, that we do our diversity plan, and the way we do our strategic agenda, and how it buys into the campus infrastructure, the strategic plan, and the way that they do their business. We've seen great improvements, if not greater than any other state, very close, in things like closing gaps. I mean, as you all know, that we've been down in overall enrollment, and the only group that's been up is our underrepresented minorities. We also know that we have our retentions up over the last few years by 13.2 percentage points of our URM, and that's compared to 8 percentage points overall. To move 8 percentage points, huge. But to double that is, for those that have been harder to move, is, I would say, short of magnificent. We're going to try to keep this up. COVID is not going to help us here, by the way, as you well know, for either one of those. Our credentials are up from URMs, as an example, 60%, whereas it's up compared 30% overall. And you have to remember, a lot of those years we were having budget cuts. So they really enjoyed our report. They really enjoyed the way that we're conducting our policies and our incentives to actually achieve what we have laid out as being some of the #1 issues that we have here. You've seen all the new reports that we've come out with, the dual credit report. If you haven't had a chance to look at that, we talked a little bit about it earlier. We released that in July. And it was our second major study around dual credit post-secondary outcomes. And once again, it looked really good. The GPAs and completion rates are much higher for those that are engaged heavily in dual credit. So we don't look at it just as an access issue. We look at it as a student success issue. You know, is there a direct correlation between those that are having dual credit in high school and their success story in college? Well, there is. And it really affects the students of color, looks like, more than others. So we just got to get more in there because we don't. This is a pipeline we're going to have to build with our equity agenda. We also released a report, analysis on workforce preparedness and early career opportunities for underrepresented minorities and low-income students in the state. This was a report we've done with CALE, which is adult experiential learning, which is a company that's owned by Strata. And MZ, who was owned by Strata at the time, I think they sold it. And we looked and identified 29 baccalaureate and associate degree programs that prepare URM and low-income students for successful careers. And as you all know, we are looking at just not programs as a whole, but which ones are having the biggest impact on all of our students. And we talk about impacts, it's not getting them through, but what kind of employment they get afterwards and how well are they prepared. We even released the Student Right to Know here, as you all know, that allows students to see exactly what majors that are out there, what jobs that are out there they get paid for, how much average debt that people accumulate in those majors and so on. So they have a right to know up front exactly what they need to do. This report looks at the back end. And so if you haven't seen that, please do so. What's coming soon is a early economic return on higher education investment. This is really our ROI #2, as you all know. We are looking at return on investment. And I really appreciate the way we've done it in this state because we're looking at real students that existed in this state and not an aggregate that is predicting, but looking at what has happened and then how we take that knowledge to use prediction. And so this is coming up fairly soon. I won't go over all the speaking engagements that's coming up. I think I'll be traveling to Northern Kentucky tomorrow to speak at the Underground Railroad, the Moonshot on Equity, and that there's a million things coming up, like several a week, so I won't go through all that, but a few of them are listed in your report. There's a whole lot more to say, but I won't take up all of our meetings saying it. I will just say this as I leave on KSU. You know, the campus administration and the board has been very open with us in working with us. We know this is not an easy task. We know that this board, it will have to make some decisions on what you approve us to move forward on. We also know that this is a worthy task. We also know that we have really no money given to us to actually take this task on. So we're doing it within our budget framework currently. How long we can continue that is another story, because we're going to have to do a variety of other items that I think to help the campus get where they need to go. I will tell you, the Frankfort community, as you heard Judge Wells say a few minutes ago, and others, they're very happy and supportive. I've gotten very great support from the Senate, the House, the governor's office. So this is something that everybody's on board, making sure that we do what we can do to help, that they're supportive of that. I want to especially thank Travis and a lot of the folks that work with Travis, who's taken a lot of the lead along with me on making this happen. So, Mr. Chair, I will end it there and take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson. Any questions for the CPE president? Okay. With that, I believe the next topic on the agenda is an update on Kentucky State University. And with that, we're going to turn it over to Travis Powell. Travis, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Luke. Appreciate you guys. and thanks for having me here today. So I just wanted to go over a little bit our responsibilities for through the executive order that the governor issued related to Kentucky State University and our oversight. The order was issued on July 20th. So I'm going to give a little bit of overview of what we have done so far to meet the obligations of the executive order and go through the different elements. And then President Stamps and CFO Greg Rush, who you all will obviously remember, a former member of our staff up until very recently, will give you a little bit of an update from the KSU perspective. So I'll take about half the time to go over what we've done so far, and then I'll leave the rest of the time up for Greg and President Stamps to speak to you all. And then please, if you have any questions, either during or after, please feel free to ask them. We're always happy to answer questions. So the first item on the executive order was that CPE is charged with providing an assessment of the current financial status of Kentucky State University, and that we shall provide a report to the governor detailing its assessment prior to providing recommendations concerning appropriations in the next biennial budget. And so, as you know, that process aligns pretty well with our overall budget submission process, which is due on November 15th. I'll give a little bit of the overview on the timeline here in a second at the end of this section. But today, with regard to the current financial status, a preliminary report will be provided to you today by Kentucky State to give you the high-level fiscal status of the institution. This information, still in a preliminary stage, was presented to KSU's board in in August rather, and it's still in the process of being verified. And with regard to that, we are in the process of independently verifying the financial status of Kentucky State University. As Aaron mentioned, we hired Susan Krause, who's a CPA and former treasurer at the University of Kentucky. Susan, if you'll turn your camera on and say hello to the folks. Susan will be here if you have any questions for her. Susan's been doing a great job assisting in the independent review and financial status assessment. She meets weekly with staff at KSU, and lately it's been daily to complete the verification. And she has been given complete access to KSU's detailed financial information so she can verify everything properly. She's tracking cash projections on a monthly basis and is verifying all information that Greg and his staff and President Stamps are providing to the KSU Board of Regents. In addition, our finance unit, led by Dr. Bill Payne, along with Susan and myself, Sean McKiernan and Ryan Kaffenberger in the finance unit are leading the charge in developing the final financial assessment report, which will support the budget request that we make for KSU. And that report will include analysis of the cash flow and working capital of the institution. We'll also do a financial health assessment which includes a historical trend analysis of various financial ratios and a use of a financial health assessment tool published by NACUBO, that's the National Association of College University Budget Officers, that generates a composite financial index score to assess financial health. Now, you'll be learning a little bit more about this at the Finance Committee in the next coming meetings. Ryan Kaffenberger from the Finance Unit will give a presentation on this tool, actually give you a lot of detail on how it works, because we're going to start using it not only in KSU's instance, but also for some of our private institutions and our public universities and KCTCS as well to assess financial health. Part of that financial assessment will also include a peer group comparison and then a pro forma analysis as well, which will give some projections as to future revenues and future financial status of the institution. And then at the end, obviously, we'll have some findings, conclusions, and some recommendations. We plan to report this out at the Kentucky State University board meeting on October 19th. October 28th, there's a Finance Committee meeting, which you'll receive the report and the recommendations related to appropriations and financial status of KSU. And then, of course, November 5th is the CPE meeting where the budget request will be finalized for submission on November 15th. The second item in the executive order is simply a note that to assist in our review, KSU shall provide CPE access to any records that we deem necessary in preparing our assessment, And as Dr. Thompson mentioned earlier, we have been getting nothing but cooperation from Kentucky State University, and we are getting everything we have asked for, completely cooperative. It's been a great working relationship as we expected it to be. And that continues, and we're really happy with that. So we're getting anything we ask for. The next section talks about CPE assisting KSU Board of Regents in developing a management and improvement plan with goals and measurable metrics, which you all will approve. And the plan will be designed to assist with organizational and financial stability. It will provide for continuing oversight and reporting to CPE concerning the implementation of the plan. And so part of that financial status piece and recommendations will be in that first report that you'll see in October. We'll start getting into the management side and organizational improvement as well very soon. And we'll have something for you to review in the next few meetings. But we'll, as Dr. Thompson mentioned, we are meeting with KSU staff, KSU alumni, various constituent groups around KSU to sort of get an idea of what needs to be improved from an organizational perspective so we can make recommendations in that regard. As Dr. Thompson mentioned again, culture matters, and we have to make sure that we have a effective culture and a positive culture at our campus in order for KSU to be successful. So, you know, there's no quick fix for long-term and strategic and sustainable success. We must be strategic, so we're going to have to be very thoughtful about what we do. There's nothing that can turn things around immediately, but KSU is a relatively small institution, so it's not this battleship that can't be turned around. And you know, while we will need to be strategic, we do think that what we put in place can have immediate impact. The prior management plan that was adopted in 2016 had significant value, and so we will look to that for guidance as to what we will do in the future. But there was really no reporting and no oversight process as part of that plan. The executive or the budget approval for that directive in 2016 really had no continuing reporting and piece of that. And so while CPE approved the plan, we received the reports, but we really had no authority over what we were receiving. And as Dr. Thompson knows, you know, there were some issues that we saw with the reports that we received. And really had limited ability to question those. But we'll make sure that that's in place moving forward, that we will get continual updates, and we'll have the opportunity to have questions and really have a lot of scrutiny on the reports that are filed and whatever plan that we come up with in order to assess the progress of KSU and meeting the goals that we set for them. Financial stability will obviously be part of that management and improvement plan as well. And I've already talked a lot about the things that we'll be looking for there. But not only on the financial side, but we'll also be making sure, and Susan is really taking a close look at this, to make sure that the proper reporting protocols are in place, the proper committees are in place, proper staffing is in place in order to assess the fiscal health of the institution on an ongoing basis, and essentially on a weekly, daily basis, even, to make sure that oversight is in place and that the right staff are in place to make sure that fiscal stewardship is there for the institution. So we'll be making recommendations in that regard, not just on what finances are needed, but what structures are needed to be put in place in order to make sure that this Kentucky State doesn't get into the situation again moving forward. The last item, you know, before I'll turn this over to Kentucky State, is the last item we're responsible for is that we are to make recommendations to the KSU board concerning KSU administrative structure and leadership, and that really focuses on, at least in the short term, on the presidency. And so we are deep into that process now. I provided feedback to KSU for the issuance of their RFP for a search firm. The board approved the issuance of an RFP for an executive search firm, and that is actually went out on the street and is now posted. It was posted on September 9th. So they are currently receiving bids for executive search firm, and we're also having discussions with the board chair about the composition of the search committee and what that will look like in order to make a recommendation of probably no more than 3, much like we did here with our previous search recommendations to the board to review for president. So we are deep in all things Kentucky State University, and I just want to thank President Stamps and Greg for their continued cooperation. Lisa Lang, the general counsel, all the folks that we've dealt with at KSU side have been completely helpful and willing to work with us. And I think we're all headed towards the same goal here of improving the institution. We've had nothing but cooperation, and even though we're in a tough situation, and they're going to talk about right now, I'm really in a firm belief that something very positive can come out of this, and something very positive will come out of this process moving forward. So without further ado, I'm happy to answer any questions, but I'll turn it over to Greg and President Stamps to talk a little bit about the current status there at Kentucky State.
Thank you, Travis.
No question.
Greg and Greg, Claire, if you want to take it away, please do.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to join you today and for the engaged interest and support the council continues to demonstrate. Your grace and concern during these challenging times is very much appreciated. University staff reported financial concerns to the board totaling nearly $15 million, and the board took action and self-reported to CPE and to the governor's office. This resulted in a leadership change, naming me as acting president and Greg Rush as the vice president for finance and administration and CFO here at Kentucky State. The campus community, working with the leadership team, has been busy addressing immediate concerns related to campus readiness. I'm sorry, next slide, please. With strong support from CPE and in keeping with the governor's executive order, we are working in close physical collaboration to adjust and reset. Next slide, please. Faculty returned back to campus for face-to-face instruction for the first time since COVID-19 on August 9th. Fall encampment focused on rebuilding trust and courageous conversations around our campus culture, change, and issues management. Employee separations occurred on July 21st, resulting in $700,000 payroll deduction. We also instituted a hiring freeze and suspended purchasing and travel campus-wide. Next slide, please. Kentucky State University is proud to be Frankfurt College. We also are proud to hold 2 federal designations, one as a historically Black college and university. As you know, these institutions were established before the Civil Rights Act of 1964. There are currently 101 HBCUs in our nation. We also hold the designation as an 1890 land grant institution. The 1890 Act granted cash instead of land and granted our colleges the same legal standing as the 1862 Act colleges. The mission of land grant institution is aimed at learning, discovery, and engagement. Next slide, please. Kentucky State University was fully accredited by SAC-COC, and we also maintain membership, which we are extremely proud to be the only Kentucky college to do so, with the Council of Public Liberal Arts Colleges. Next slide. Kentucky State University offers more than 60 degree programs, from associate degree to a doctoral in nursing practice, and we also offer nearly 30 undergraduate certificates. Next slide. Kentucky State University in the fall of 2020 had nearly 60% of our undergraduate population were Kentucky residents. More than 33% of our students were the first in their families to earn college degrees in 2020, and 76% of our graduating class was either first generation or low income or both. 54% of our graduates are employed in Kentucky within 3 years of graduation. Our current student undergraduate population consists of 52% Kentucky residents. Next slide. Our enrollment has been steady. This current number you see here, 2,434, has slightly decreased due to our non-attend drops and for those students who were unable to meet their financial obligations. I think it is important to note here that Kentucky State University suspended admissions this year due to our housing capacity on campus and the limited housing that was available in the Frankfurt community for auxiliary housing. Next slide. 52% of our undergraduates are Pell recipients. This reflects our mission to serve first generation and low income student. Our fall to fall retention rate is at an all-time high of 80%. This is due to the implementation of new programs and support services, increasing the academic achievement and outcomes of our students. Our graduation rate increased 7% this year for our sixth year cohort. The percentage of first-time, full-time bachelor degree seeking students who complete their program within 6 years. Next slide. These are our last year's rankings with U.S. News and World Reports. As you know, new rankings came out yesterday, so we'll update this slide moving forward. But last year, we were ranked #1 as a best value within our region, #7 among public institutions within our region, and #12 best college for veterans. 29 among the 101 historically Black colleges and university, and 36 among Southern regional institutions, and 53 in social mobility within our region. I thank you for the opportunity to present to you today, and I thank President Thompson and everyone at CPE for your leadership and your continued support of KSU. At this time, I'll turn it over to CFO Rush.
Thank you, President Stamps. Good morning, everyone. It's been a little while since I've been in front of you. Let's see. Yeah, Heather, that's the right slide. Yeah, skip one more. There we go. As you all are probably aware, President Stamps went through kind of how we got to this position and leadership change. And as part of the executive order, President Thompson allowed me to go ahead and go on over to KSU the week of July 20th. I was officially appointed effective July 26th. And again, we've worked very closely with CPE and Travis and Susan and Bill and all the folks there over the past couple of months to assess where KSU is and begin to map out a plan going forward. Go ahead and advance to the next slide, Heather. When we came in, we discovered that there had been a number of things that had happened over the past 2 or 3 years that were pushing expenses into the current fiscal year. We had construction accounts of the state that hadn't been reimbursed. We had invoices from the prior year that weren't paid until July of the current year. We had some issues with funds being reserved appropriately, such as the asset preservation fee and to some degree the land grant match. And then the campus had taken out essentially a line of credit, one styled as a revenue anticipation note. And it's a type of financing that should be cleared within the current fiscal year. And it was not cleared last fiscal year, and it carried over into the current year, and it was $5 million. And what that resulted in when President Stamps and I began the third week of July was that most of the first quarter state appropriation had been spent to satisfy the revenue anticipation note and some other obligations that were immediate. And at the end of July, or at the third week of July, we had about $2.8 million of cash available, with $4.3 million of outstanding invoices and about $3 million of payroll due to hit the next week. So it was definitely a crisis from a cash standpoint. We worked with CPE and the state budget office to advance our fourth quarter general fund allotment. They were helpful, very helpful in allowing us to do that, which allowed us to make payroll in July. And in the first part of August. We were able to do a debt forgiveness plan funded out of the Higher Education Emergency Relief Fund, which you've seen a number of schools do. And that helped our students significantly in lowering debt that had accumulated during the pandemic. It also had the benefit of providing the university with about $2.5 million of additional funding or additional cash in August, which got us to this point. And in September, we're now at the point where we are collecting tuition revenue, and the cash crisis has relaxed a bit, although it will be back because the actions that we had to take in advancing the fourth quarter allotment basically just delay the problem. In this slide, as we're learning, and Travis mentioned current financial status, we're at about 16 million of prior year expenses that carried forward into this year. And obviously this is not something we can cut our way out of. That represents over 35% of our current education and general budget. So trying to cut that out of the university budget in 1 year is essentially impossible. As we're also looking, now that we've gotten the cash position stabilized, we've gotten the year started, we've dealt with a number of issues related to facilities and student balances and student accounts. We've now begun to free up a bit of time in the last week or two to really focus in on this current year budget with Susan's help and CPE's help. And we're still working to finalize the number in the current year shortfall. And the bullets I have on this slide were probably overly optimistic. We had hoped when we started we would be able to manage the 22 budget within current year revenues, but what we're finding is the commitments that were made coming into this fiscal year are so large that it's very unlikely we'll be able to reduce our budget enough to balance this current fiscal year. So I anticipate right now that $15.7 million number is going to grow. We're hoping by the end of the week, we're working with Susan to verify our projections to be able to give CPE and our other stakeholders a better idea of what that number is going to be, but it's safe to say it's going to grow at this point. Heather, if you want to go ahead to the next slide. Travis had talked about the executive order, and I wanted to mention some of the things that the campus is doing, and I think he's pretty much covered these, but I just want to reiterate that we're working hand in hand with CPE on everything that we're putting out there. Anything I present to the board, anything I present to the legislature, we're submitting to CPE to verify, and I've given them complete access to any source documents that are needed for them to verify any information we provide. We're engaged with CPE constantly in discussions regarding the structure, culture, leadership, and overall management of the university. We are in a regular communication with CPE staff and are in the process of beginning to work through the first few documents that are going to be required under the executive order. And I think we're on track to have those done within the timetable that's laid out in the executive order. And we have committed, and this is everyone in KSU leadership and KSU's board, we're committed to being completely transparent and accountable as we work through this. We're not hiding anything. We've been completely open with legislative folks that we've worked with the board, with the council, and we'll continue to do so as we work through this. Next slide, please. We're working, our board has had a number of concerns with the information that's been provided to them over the last few years, and are very concerned that they're having information that they can rely on, and in a way that it is clear for them to see what's going on with the university. One of the things is the current budget structure, and the way the budget's been presented to the board basically just puts a lot of things in one I guess, budget bucket, for lack of a better term. And so it's very, very difficult for them to see the different pieces of the budget, and difficult for them to see that funds that are required to be restricted and limited in use are actually being restricted and being segregated in an appropriate budget. So we've worked with CPE to develop a new budget structure, and we're going to present to our board, hopefully at the December meeting, new budgets for that separate this out into 4 different items. And it's important to break out auxiliaries, asset preservation, particularly because what has happened over the years, and part of the reason that our residential halls are challenged right now, we've not appropriately reserved money to handle deferred maintenance issues with our residence halls, because those typically are not included in any deferred maintenance or asset preservation requests to the state. So even if the request that Dr. Thompson talked about earlier was funded, it wouldn't provide money for our residence halls. So that's something that we have to make sure we have the discipline from a budget standpoint to manage our budget where we can do those things. CPE was helpful for us in 2018 and it gave us the ability to do an asset preservation fee, which we have charged to students. And that's designed to help us with infrastructure issues, roofs, building envelopes, boilers, electrical work, ADA, those kind of things. That money has not been properly segregated within the budget, which is part of our budget issue for this year and for last year. So we're going to present a separate budget for that as well, where the board can tell that these funds are properly separated. And same with land grant match. We are now fully funded. Not every HBCU and land grant HBCU across the country is fully funded, but the General Assembly has funded that for us. And so we have an obligation to preserve those funds for their intended use and to make sure that that's transparent to everyone involved. And at this point, going forward, specific board approval will be required to transfer funds between budgets. So we have to live within each individual budget we create. And then if we do need to move money from one to the other, the board will have to be informed. There'll have to be a justification, explanation, and the board will have to approve it. Next slide, please, Heather. And the other thing that kind of goes along with that, in that the board did not feel like they were receiving information that they needed to understand the situation the university was in. So we've begun, and we actually began at our last meeting, reporting to the board our cash position. We report that now every meeting compared to the prior year. An aging schedule of payables, because we had developed a history over the past 2 or 3 years of not paying vendors. When I got here, we had almost $2 million in vendor invoices that were over 4 months old that had to be cleared. So the board needs to know if we're getting into that kind of situation. Reports on accounts receivable, primarily focused on student receivables. They'll also receive reports on all personnel actions, that's separations, new employees, salary adjustments, promotions, et cetera. And we're working with, as we work through this with the council, I know Susan has kind of a packet of reports that I think she'll recommend, and we'll have new things as we move forward, and new budget to actual reports and those kind of things that we'll present to the board each meeting. And right now, all these reports that we present to the board are going to be verified by CPE staff and by the KSU internal auditor. Next slide, please, Heather. And the last thing I've got that I wanted to mention, because I know there's been a lot of questions about the new residence hall that KSU has entered into as a public-private partnership with CRM. And that is the company that has managed the 2 state P3 projects, the building on Sauer Boulevard and the Mayo Underwood building down on Merrill Street in downtown Frankfurt. So this particular transaction is structured almost identically to how those transactions were structured. It was approved by the Capital Projects and Bond Oversight Committee last April. Construction is well underway and on track for completion by January 23rd. The financing for the residence hall was sold on July 27th with an all-in interest cost of about 3.11%, and that's approximately $55 million bond issue or project. And the way it was structured is there is a trustee that essentially sold the bonds, and they hold the proceeds. The contractor can draw against that. KSU is not involved in that part of the transaction. Those funds are not available to us in any way. and they're solely for construction of the building. The sale was actually not rated by Moody's because the state intercept provision doesn't, which is a provision in statute where the state can intercept the general fund appropriation for post-secondary institutions to pay their bonds should they default. That statutory provision, I think, was determined doesn't apply to P3s. And so that caused some issues with rating by Moody's. But we do have a memorandum in place with the Finance Administration Cabinet that Travis helped us work through that essentially replicates that intercept provision that's in statute. And I think contributed greatly to our interest costs being pretty good given this market. The first lease payment will be due in March of 23rd, with the annual payment will be about $3.8 million. The building will have about 408 beds in it, and also a new dining hall for the campus. And the rates per semester are going to be approximately $4,600 per bed, which is comparable to the new residence halls, particularly at the University of Kentucky, and I think some of the newest halls at Western U of L. So that's all I had to share with you today. And I'm sure President Stamps and I are available to answer any questions you might have.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Rush or President Stamps? Or for Travis? Okay. Well, thank you very much for that presentation. I know it's going to be tough going forward, but you guys are doing an outstanding job, and we appreciate all that's going on, and we're here to help however we can. Okay. Before we move on, just a point of order. I want to welcome Mr. Kevin Weaver, Mr. Colby Burks, and Mr. Jason Glass to the call. Just for the record, welcome, gentlemen. Okay. Next order on the agenda is a briefing from KET. I wanted to say a few words. First, welcome to Shay Hopkins, Tanya Crum, and Tim Biscoff. Thank you all very much for coming. I had the absolute pleasure and honor of serving on the KET board for a while. And one of the things that I learned very early on was how outstanding of an organization they are. And I realized that I've been blessed to be a part of two great organizations, CPE and KET. And I said, hey, we need to collaborate more. And so this is kind of the first opportunity that I saw to bring these two great organizations together. And for those on the council, I just wanted to be able to share what I was seeing, all the great work they were doing. And I'm hoping that this is the first of many collaborations that we can have in the future. So with that, no further ado, because you all want to hear from them. Trust me, they're far more interesting than I am. I'll turn it over to Shay and Tanya. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Luke, and good morning, everyone. We really appreciate this opportunity to be with you. For many, KET is best known for programs like Antiques Roadshow, Nature, Nova, or iconic series like Sesame Street. And that's great because with 4 channels broadcasting 24/7, these programs are a big part of what we do. However, we do much more. So here to share the KET you don't see is our Senior Director of Education, Tanya Crum. Tanya?
Thank you, Shay. Thank you, Luke. And thank you to the board for having us here with you today. I am delighted to get to share with you about the KET you don't see. So Shay just mentioned to you our 4 channels. And so I am really glad to tell you a little about our education services. And some of you on the call, I recognize your names. And so it's good to see you again. And you may know some of these things, but I'm sure we'll mention some new pieces of information today. So KET, education has been it's our middle name, of course, but it's also been at the heart of our mission since we went on the air over 50 years ago, and we have never wavered from that. Yes, ma'am?
I'm going to let you know there's a box on the right that's covering up part of your slides. You may want to hide that.
Yeah. Is that better?
Yes, much better. Thank you.
Thanks, Heather. I appreciate it. Yeah, I want you to be able to see all the words for sure. And so our we're this trusted resource. We've been in schools, we've been working with many agencies across the state, and we're just proud to serve statewide, offering professional development, instructional resource creation for classrooms and for parents at home with their children. And many of our workshops are in person, and of course virtual now at this time. But lots of consultations that I want to tell you about in a little bit. But honestly, I don't know if I can say it much better than your president here at CPE, Aaron Thompson. So let me share this video.
You've heard that saying that you've learned everything you need to learn by the time you're in kindergarten. You don't really know everything by then, but you're setting it up in a way that learning can take place and you can interact with that learning, you can grow with that learning as you move throughout life. Whether it's in early childhood, or whether it's some of your programming that reaches out to young adulthood, or whether it's for old folk like me, right? KETCH, truly, if you look at your programming, it's all about the love of learning. Building that dynamic of learning is powerful. Exposing them to quality early childhood education is powerful. When people ask me, well, what can we do to help higher education? I said, build a quality, big-time early childhood system where everybody gets engaged with it that can learn. And we're going to have to use all of the resources that we have to make that happen. And KET, what a huge resource for Kentucky.
So as Dr. Thompson shared, early childhood education is this strong foundation that we need really to build a better Kentucky, and including to build our higher education system. And so our early childhood education division provides content, professional development for childcare centers, also for daycare centers, Head Start centers, and school districts around Kentucky. So we're providing that training in person. We provide self-paced professional development courses that childcare centers can earn credit for attending and completing those assignments. And then we have lots of resources. In particular, one of our collections is called Everyday Learning. These resources are in a repository called PBS Learning Media, which I'll tell you a little more about. But this Everyday Learning Initiative has nearly 100 videos, lesson plans, and other resources included for use all over Kentucky and nationally. And these resources were a grant-funded partnership that we worked through a couple of years ago, and we've been able to translate many of the videos also into Spanish. So let's take a moment and see one of those.
Let's look inside our body. Your body is made of many parts that help you move and think. Body parts work together when you draw and dance and drink. Some parts you see on the outside, like your eyes and mouth and nose. Some parts are on the inside, like bones and muscles to move your toes. Feel the bone that holds up your mouth and your chin. It's part of the skeleton that's underneath your skin. Your skull protects your brain and holds up your head. Your teeth help you smile and talk into your bread. You can feel your spine in the middle of your back. Your spine helps you bend and twist and carry a backpack. Your ribs are like a cage that protects your lungs and heart. Your arm bones move together. The elbow hinge does its part. The tibia is a strong bone from your ankle to knee high. The femur is the longest bone. It's found inside your thigh. Your bones help you swim and run and play and throw. You need milk and healthy food to make your bones and body grow.
So videos and content like that for early childhood centers to use. We usually use those kid voices, and children really love to hear other children helping them learn. But also those resources come along with ideas for lesson plans in the classroom, things that daycare centers can do with very few resources, rubber bands and plastic bags, outside activity ideas as well. But in addition to all of the classroom support that we provide, and as Shay mentioned, we have 4 channels. One of those channels is our 24/7 Kids channel. PBS Kids programming is also on our other channels as well, but research is showing that PBS Kids program, because they are rooted strongly in education and educational research, it helps boost early literacy skills and improves math skills, reading skills. And really one of the things I love about it is it encourages parental engagement. And so we know that parents are your child's first teacher, and we want to encourage parents to watch with their children, talk about what they're seeing. You don't have to be a certified teacher to teach your child, even just talking to them as the youngest learner. So we're excited to be able to continue to provide PBS Kids programming as well. PBS Learning Media is where many of these resources exist. It is a free repository. It's searchable. It's aligned to Kentucky academic standards. Our resources that we put in. These resources were viewed in last year over 1.7 million times in PBS Learning Media. These virtual resources were very easy for teachers to incorporate into Google Classroom or Moodle or Canvas, whichever learning system they were using while they were providing virtual instruction. These resources, we saw a 23% increase last year just in the way those resources were being viewed and used. And so KET, I'll have to say and brag on us for a moment, we are one of the main producers of content for PBS Learning Media nationally, and our resources are some of the most viewed resources nationally. And so resources like you saw with Everyday Learning are viewed and oftentimes in the top 10 of the resources used in learning media across the nation. And so we're proud to continue to offer that service, not just here in Kentucky, but across the country as well. Of course, there are other resources in learning media aside from KET's resources, like Ken Burns documentaries, Nova, Nature, Khan Academy resources are in learning media as well. So it's a great resource for teachers to have access to. I want to take a moment and show you one of our newer resources. We have a new collection called Social Studies Shorts. And this resource I'm going to show you is just a piece of a video clip that teachers could use in the classroom. It's the one that we did about presidential inaugurations. It was released in early January and has been viewed over 45,000 times, which is huge for a singular resource in learning media. So let's take a look.
Hi, and welcome to Social Studies Shorts, where we explore a little more about our state, our country, and the world. Every 4 years, voters in the United States have the chance to elect a new president. Soon after the election process comes an equally exciting event known as the inauguration. Luckily, the day is televised so we can all join in the festivities. The inauguration marks the start of a U.S. president's 4-year term. It's when the president takes the oath of office, which is required by the Constitution. George Washington's first inauguration was held on April 30th, 1789, but by his second term, the Continental Congress had set March 4th as the official date for future inaugurations. Presidential elections happen in early November, so why wait so long between the election and inauguration? Well, new presidents need time to make plans for their government and set up their cabinets. But not too much time. By the 1930s, when Franklin D. Roosevelt was set to take office during the Great Depression, it was clear the president-elect needed the chance to put his plans into action more quickly. In 1933, the 20th Amendment to the Constitution was ratified, saying that a president's term ends on January 20th at noon. The oath of office for all future presidents must happen as close to that exact time as possible.
So you'll have to log in to watch more of that resource, but there's some great historical footage that we were able to include, some animated pieces. And these resources are really created for those students in grades 4 through 8, although they can be used at upper grades and lower grades as well as teachers see fit. Just a few examples of some of the additional content that we're producing. We are adding hundreds of resources to PBS Learning Media every year. This year, we added some field trips to the Capitol, which I think you would all really enjoy seeing. We don't have time to show them to you this morning, but we did 3 field trips, one on the history, one focused on art, and one on architecture, and aligned to various grade levels from 4 to 12. And so those resources have been really well received, especially during this time when our students aren't taking field trips. News Quiz, I mentioned it's an award-winning current event series. It's a weekly program, and it skyrocketed in views over this last year. Over 160,000 students were using that resource. Really, really proud of News Quiz. It's been going for, I think this is its 36th season. STEM Works is a collection of resources around science, technology, engineering, and math. We also have a lot of arts content, so if you know it as STEAM, but those resources are really aimed at helping students understand content as it relates to future jobs that they may have. Our professional development courses are offered online, and I know are also utilized by many of our institutions, regional education institutions, for pre-service students, so who are going to be teachers, and they're taking some of these courses about positive behavior in schools and earning credit for that in relation to their classes in college. But also we know that those are utilized by teachers and staff across the state. Many of those courses were created through grant funding and partnership with the Department of Education, and we're serving as an opportunity to serve thousands of teachers and staff in a short period of time across the entire state. So back to that cost-effective piece, we've been partnering to help solve many of these challenges over the years. Social and emotional learning, many of you are hearing about that. And I will say over this last year, we've also had some opportunities to create some content on mental health during the COVID pandemic, also suicide prevention training in partnership with the Department for Education. But also I will say we're creating many more resources for teachers to understand and give them ideas to help students feel comfortable with their social and emotional development. And if you're wondering what that is, we've got a teacher who can tell you best.
Social and emotional learning teaches the soft skills that we all need to function in our work and school. When we can build and show empathy for others, show respect, offer grace, kindness, forgiveness, perseverance, those are all those soft skills that every employer hopes their employee exhibits. But we have never had an emotion education until now. And so we can prepare our students for not just the future employment opportunities, but to have a better sense of community and working relationship with those in their classroom and in their school. But the research also shows that social and emotional learning improves academic success. So it's a win-win.
So we'll just look for more. We're doing many more resources on social and emotional learning and mental health as we move forward throughout the next school year. Another piece of KET's education service is our regional education consultants. They have spent time traveling to schools, working with teachers in classrooms about media integration in the classrooms. Much of that, almost all of that, has turned to virtual over this last year and a half, and we've seen great success with that model. Teachers are also learning more about how to do some video production. So we like to believe that some of that training we've been providing to teachers over the years prepared them for instructing their classes through Zoom and other platforms over this last year and a half. Again, we have done in-person and virtual training for pre-service teachers at the universities, and then our media lab at KET, where we actually train students. Each year they would come to KET, they're not right now, but we do these virtual workshops as well, so students understand how to better use technology to build instructional resources. But also we partner with KDE on the STLP project, a student technology learning program, and we're just delighted to be part of that work as well. I should mention we have a college financial aid program that we air in the fall. That's coming up October 18th on a Monday night. We work with KEA to make sure parents understand to fill out that FAFSA form and do that year over year. So we're answering common questions that parents have about that process as well. So look for that October 18th. Virtual physics labs, you may not be aware of these. Virtual physics labs are just that, physics lab opportunities that are virtual. And so KET created these a few years ago. They're the only labs like it in the country. And last year we had over 12,000 students around the nation at universities using our labs to incorporate those opportunities for students who couldn't be there in person. But it's also, again, just another cost savings. You don't have to replace broken equipment, but you can also do experiments you couldn't safely do in person. So we're proud to offer that resource as well. And the last piece that I want to touch on is our work in adult education. And those of you who know me know this is where I began my career working with adult ed and GED prep. Such an opportunity we have to serve hundreds of thousands of adults in Kentucky without a high school equivalency diploma. KET has been providing this resource for over 40 years, starting with GED on TV. But we have transitioned to an online program called Fast Forward. It is used in 48 states across the country at this moment, but also has a 90% pass rate of those students who use Fast Forward and take all 4 parts of the test. So we are really pleased to offer that opportunity. It's a mobile-friendly program. GED Testing Service nationally tells us we're one of the only mobile-friendly programs in the country. Again, just another opportunity to be really proud of the services we provide first here in Kentucky. We've also been part of other grant opportunities from the national level. American Graduate was a national project with the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. We've worked with some grant funding with Department of Workforce Investment in the Workforce Innovation Board to create In Demand. I'd love for you to see those videos. You'll have to look for them online, ket.org/in-demand, but also Workplace Essential Skills. Workplace Essential Skills is our newest online instructional system. Can be used by a learner on their own, but also can be used in learning centers and other libraries, other learning institutions. This content is really exciting because it is all contextualized. So we're teaching math and language arts skills to those adults who might be around the 6th to 8th grade reading level, certainly for those who are at a higher level as well. But it's all in the context of work. So if we're teaching math, we're going to teach it in the context of logistics or manufacturing. Why do I need to know fractions? Students always ask. And so we actually answer those questions in these courses. And so I will show you this last video here.
We use multiplication in our business every time we need to calculate the amount of materials we need for a job. When it comes to replacing shingles on a roof, we have 3 bundles of shingles per square. 1 square is the equivalent of 100 square feet. So if you have a roof that is 300 square feet, then you will need 3 squares worth of shingles. For every square you have 3 bundles, so 3 times 3 would be 9. You would need 9 bundles of shingles to replace that roof.
When a customer calls in and asks for 4 loads of concrete, I know that a full load of concrete is 9 cubic yards. I do the basic simple math of 9 times 4 is 36. So I know that when a customer calls in and asks for 4 loads, it's 36 cubic yards of concrete that we're going to deliver to that customer.
So I've given you a very fast overview of all of the services and resources that we provide in the education division at KET. I hope you've learned some new things today about the content, the alignment to standards, our close partnerships with teachers in the classrooms, and with the Department of Education as they serve these schools throughout the state. And we are all just looking to make sure that teachers have access and students have access to the content they need, no matter where they are in Kentucky. So I thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much, Tanya. Any questions for the team here at KET?
Mr. Chair, I did have a couple of statements.
Please.
Good to see Shay and Tanya. I love KET, as you could tell. But, you know, you also have to think of the programs like Renee Shaw's Education Tonight, Connections, all of these things. If you look at KET, and I don't recommend this, I recommend everybody going to college. But you can get a college education almost, right? And so I really appreciate, Chair, you inviting KET to come to the table today. Fairly often we get locked up in business and doing the things that we need to do and fail to see the education around us. And I just want to thank KET for all the work you're doing. Continued success, and we look forward to being your partner.
Thanks so much.
Any other questions or comments?
I was just going to thank Aaron for the time he gave us and for that very kind endorsement. So we really appreciate it. And Luke, if I might just put in a plug, I don't know if people will be able to see this or not, but Sunday night is Kim Burns' newest documentary, Muhammad Ali. So it's going to be shown over 4 consecutive nights starting at 8. And we also have some virtual events going on this week, including a conversation on Thursday evening hosted by Renee Shaw, and it will include Sarah Burns, Kim Burns' daughter, who is one of the producers of the program, and several people from Louisville who are going to talk about their reflections of growing up with Muhammad Ali in Louisville. So it should be very interesting, and we invite you all to join us for that. You can find more information at our website, ket.org. Thanks so much.
Very welcome.
Shay
Go
and
ahead,
Tanya,
Madison.
thank you so much for joining us. I don't know whether this was intentional or not. I've seen it a few places, but not widely used. But education is our middle name is a heck of a tagline. You use it as much as you can. I will remember that for the rest of my life. It's never occurred to me before today. So good job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd also like to say from a K-12 perspective that the segment on social emotional learning was extremely well done and an outstanding explanation for a misunderstood term. And we appreciate that.
Thank you so much. We look forward to creating many more resources to help teachers and students and others who need to better understand.
I had a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I use KET a lot in the law school setting for a variety of reasons. Probably my favorite, I looked it back up, that I've ever seen on KET is the voting rights and election law discussion they had back in last semester, and it helped me dissect a lot with the changing voting laws in Kentucky and otherwise. My point is, I also have a mom who's an elementary school teacher, and I know KET is really useful in that area. But has there been any kind of efforts to push some of the KET content? Because like I said, I use it a lot. I'm using it right now to write my law review article for next semester. But I don't think it's widely used in my setting, even though it's very helpful to me. So I didn't know if there's any moves towards like what you're doing at the in the K through 12 school system, pushing the education opportunities there. If there's also that opportunity to expand it and expand the knowledge of how useful it can be in the higher education and graduate program context.
That's a great comment, Colby. I appreciate it. We have in the past done that with certain programs. So I know we've worked, as we've done some health documentaries, we've created discussion guides to share with colleges of health who are working on those kinds of programs to utilize the content that way. But I don't know that we've reached out directly to law schools and other places within the university system. So I'll take that back and we'll think about ways we can get the word out, because I really appreciate kind of that quick testimony on how useful the content is in other areas of study. So we'll take a look for sure. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right. Thank you all very much. I miss you guys very much, but
Thank you.
and I hope you guys continue to do great work. I recommend everyone on the council and everyone listening check out the great programming at KET. As the father of an 8-year-old, PBS Kids is on every TV and every device that we have, and we watch it all the time. So, yeah. All right. Next on the agenda is the Kentucky P-12 education update. For this, Commissioner Glass, would you like to give your report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, President Thompson. I'll do my best to be brief. I know that you've got a full agenda today. I think probably where I'll start is just recapping the special session that we had last week and some of the determinations that were made and what that means for our schools in the state going forward. The special session included an education bill, SB1 and HB1, that were passed into law. We, from the department standpoint, advocated for 4 areas of change or support with those, and we got parts of that in every area. The first of those was around funding stability. And by that, the challenge that we have is that funding in Kentucky for the next school year is determined based on average daily attendance calculations in the current year. And of course, schools are experiencing high levels of absences. Typically, we run between 95 and 99% attendance on any school day in Kentucky. We're seeing attendance in 85 and below 80% in some districts because of quarantining, because of illness, because of fear. There's all sorts of reasons, but we're seeing significant drops in attendance. So that had our districts panicked about what funding next year was going to look like if they were experiencing this 10-15% drop in attendance. If funding were to be based on that for next year, it would be catastrophic in terms of the cuts and reductions that schools would receive. So what we advocated for from KDE's perspective was to use a historical count number to go back to the 1819 or the 1920 school year, 1819 being the last undisrupted year that we had. Use the enrollment counts from that year and then project that forward and use that next year to establish funding stability. We do have some challenges with using that in terms of growth districts, of districts that are getting larger and larger than they were in those previous counts. And so that's something the legislature is going to have to address. But in terms of funding stability, the legislature did a good thing by establishing that stability, and districts can at least count on the enrollment numbers that they had in 1819 or 1920, depending on their choice for funding for next year. So that was a good change, and the legislature followed our requests on that. We also asked for flexibility around school operations. One of the problems that schools are experiencing is with high levels of quarantining and disruptions to staff attendance. Schools were needing to shut down. The only tool that they really had at their disposal was to shift to something that we've all heard about called NTI, or non-traditional instruction. NTI is a district-wide tool. You close the entire district and shift to remote instruction. It was originally designed as a way to allow districts to continue instruction due to severe weather events. But now, of course, it was used last year and part of the year before because of COVID disruptions. Districts this year were limited to only 10 NTI days. Again, this is an entire district function. And they were concerned that if they used them up now, when you get into the winter and then in the spring and we start having snow and ice storms, and you have a hilly rural district and you end up having to close for 7 or 8 days and you've used 8 or 10 days now because of COVID, you have serious funding implications or are faced with the difficult proposition of adding on days at the end of the year, which is difficult to get kids to stay around, and staff have other plans as well. So that's not a perfect solution either. What we asked the legislature to do was to expand the number of available NTI days to districts and simultaneously create something that we call temporary remote instruction. And temporary remote instruction allows a district at a school, at a grade, or at a classroom level to shift to that remote instruction. So it's unlike NTI that you have to close the whole district. It really allows them to surgically decide at what level they're seeing disruptions due to COVID outbreaks or quarantining, and then close and shift to remote temporarily in those cases. The legislature, or we also requested the legislature that they allow districts to temporarily use what we call hybrid instruction. So part of the students are learning at home, part of the students are learning at school, and there's an alternating schedule on that. The legislature did not add more NTI days. They significantly limited the number of temporary remote instruction days. Again, those are those days at the school, at the grade, or at the classroom level. And they made some requirements around how staff had to operate during those temporary remote instruction days. And they did not allow for any hybrid instruction. So they significantly limited what our recommendation to them was. But I do think that districts will take advantage of those temporary remote instruction. That's some flexibility. It goes further in a small rural district than it does in a large district. So that was a scaling problem that the legislature introduced by putting a cap on the number of days. So the shift to that in Jefferson County impacts a lot more schools than it would in a rural and small county. The other area that we requested additional support was around staffing, flexibility in staffing. The KDE and the other education associations, several of the other education associations recommended opening up rules around the use of retirees for this year, being able to bring them back with very few limitations and use them for this 1 year. The legislature did part of that, again, going part of the way in what was recommended, in that they expanded the caps on the number of retirees, but they only allow them to be used through the end of this year. So that's a really short-term support. And finally, on the elements that got all the political attention around the Kentucky Board of Education's mandate or requirement for universal masking indoors in schools, the legislature has ended and declared null and unenforceable that requirement from the state board. That will expire on Friday. So it's currently still in force, but on Friday that will expire, and that decision will then shift to local districts to make that determination. So far, and what we're seeing is that districts that have made an announcement, all of them have said that they're going to continue with universal indoor masking for the time being. Some of them have set dates in the future when they're going to reconsider that decision. Our recommendation to districts has been clear and unambiguous based on the advice of the Centers for Disease Control, or Kentucky Department of Public Health, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and the support of the American Medical Association. It's clear from the medical and public health community that there's a strong recommendation for continued indoor masking. And because we see natural experiments happening around the country and communities right next to each other, or sometimes within the same city, where districts are some requiring universal masking and others are not, we are seeing differences in terms of outbreaks and quarantining that's taking place. So the evidence is clear and the recommendations are clear, and our recommendation to districts is clear. Continue masking for the time being. We all want to get to a point where this is no longer necessary. Now is not that time. So again, the legislature went against our recommendations on this, but that is their prerogative, and this is now a local determination. In terms of sort of summarizing all of that, I would say that the legislature empowered and gave the decision on public health decisions to school districts and school district boards, but they significantly limited and micromanaged the educational decisions of school districts and school district boards. So that is my summary of the flexibility that's come out. I hope it's enough. So in the short term, it might be. And if we see this sort of decline once the virus has infected all of the unvaccinated individuals and breakthrough cases that it's going to, the virus should start to drop. I hope that there's not another variant that we have to contend with, or this doesn't persist on, but those are all hopes. And so the legislature gave us really limited and short-term solutions on this that we hope will be sufficient. But we don't know. You may have heard the Biden administration talking about requirements around vaccinations nationally for employers that have over 100 employees. That would include Kentucky as one of the 26 states and territories that has an OSHA approved state plan. We believe that order, we haven't seen it yet, so we'll continue to evaluate that. We believe that order will extend to public schools and require either vaccinations or weekly testing of individuals that work in public schools. We expect that to get challenged in court, and there will be all sorts of moves and counter moves as that moves continues to move forward. So we'll keep our eyes on that. In support of vaccinations, the Kentucky Department of Education has used some of our federal COVID relief funds to provide incentives to school district employees to get vaccinated if they haven't been, or a reward for those that have already been. We've used $8.8 million and provided that to districts in a reimbursement program. We're encouraging districts to match that, and effectively that would be with match a $200 either reward or incentive for vaccinations. So if this federal OSHA temporary emergency temporary standard doesn't come into effect, we still have these incentives in place. And even if it does, it may help. We hope that it helps districts get more employees across the line and get vaccinated. We know that that's the best and most effective way of protecting our staff, our kids, and our community, and getting this the disruption of this disease behind us. A couple of other quick notes before I turn things back over to you, Mr. Chair. We continue the work around equity with the council staff and developing diversity and equity and inclusion modules that are available to teaching staff in Kentucky and to teacher education programs. So that's a partnership and work that we do with CPE. And of course, I'm one of the co-chairs with Lieutenant Governor Coleman and President Thompson on the Commonwealth Continuum, which has done, I think, great work to date around planning out how we can increase the number of Kentuckians that are seeking out higher education opportunities and graduating with some kind of degree or credential to prepare them for life and work ahead. So that work is in development, but I'm excited where that's headed. I oversee the early post-secondary options group along with Paul Zarapata from the community college and technical college system. So I'm really pleased with the way that that's shaping up, and hats off to President Thompson for bringing this idea forward for us. One last point, put on your calendars November 1st and 2nd. There will be a Kentucky Education Summit held in Louisville on those dates. It's an in-person event, but we are limiting attendance, and we'll have all sorts of virus mitigation strategies in place to keep everybody safe. But we have a lineup of dynamic national speakers as well as state and local thinkers and leaders to react to that, to really imagine what the future of education in Kentucky from the pre-K-12 perspective should be and could be. We're relying on the voices of Kentuckians and their experiences to date and their aspirations going forward to form that. So if you haven't registered, please do so. You can look on the department social media pages, and it's the first pinned tweet or post that we have, and get yourself registered, and we'll be also releasing more information just as the agenda for that is finalized. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll stop there, and happy to take any questions or feedback that anyone has. Otherwise, I'll turn things back to you.
Thank you, Commissioner Glass. I appreciate that. Anybody have any questions for Commissioner Glass?
This is Dr. Barber, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Glass, I thank you so much for giving the synopsis. I'm right now sitting in my hospital, and I'll tell you that we are being overwhelmed with COVID-19. We have folks who are waiting in emergency room for a bed for 6-7 days. I think a couple of teachers have also died of COVID in JCPS, if I'm not wrong. I think there was one staffer in Lee County. It's my 14-year-old. They both are vaccinated, and they wear their mask. But every day they come home and they tell us that there are kids who have turned COVID positive. So I hope that the decisions which we are taking that will not harm us in winter when there are high chances that COVID-19 may increase. I know that we are not supposed to ask about vaccination status, but is there any guesstimate that what is the vaccination rate among our teachers in the Commonwealth?
That is not information that we have collected. We did see from Jefferson County, one district that publicly reported their vaccination rate. So it was close to 70%. That's good. We could do better in Jefferson County. And I expect that we have variability across the state in terms of the staff that got vaccinated. Of course, teachers and school personnel were put right behind medical personnel and other care facility personnel in terms of priority for vaccination, but we've clearly got more work to do. Dr. Stack said something to me that really resonated, and that is that this Delta variant and the surge that we're seeing is an epidemic among the unvaccinated largely. So that's who we've got to target and get progress on. With this incentive program that KDE is offering, we'll be requiring districts that participate in that. It works as a reimbursement. So a school district employee would show their vaccination and the dates on it. The school district would log that and then provide the employee that $100 or $200 if there's a match incentive. And then the state will then pay back the district for that. So through that data collection, we hope to get better data on who was vaccinated at what point and how much of an impact the incentive had. Again, not all districts will participate in that and not all employees have to participate in that. So the data will be incomplete, but I think it will give us better information than we have right now.
Would there be any attempts to promote vaccination among the children? I know it's a very partisan environment, but
I certainly will be doing that and have been doing that. Of course, we don't have a vaccine for students that are under 12. And that's one of the reasons that we think it's so important that we have masking and layers of virus mitigation protocols in place. Is that we are dealing with a congregate setting. We have students from different families that are coming together in person in an enclosed indoor space. And with students under 12, we have a large unvaccinated population. With students 12 to 18, we have one of the lowest rates of vaccination among that group. And we are, as you are seeing and experiencing, this is a disease that can infect students as well. So we have to be all the more cautious and careful when it comes to those in-person experiences. We know that they're so important. We want to keep those going. We want to prioritize that, and we want to do that safely. So we look forward to the day, hopefully in the next couple of months, that we get approval for vaccination for students under 12, and we've got to keep supporting greater levels of vaccination for all of our students. Dr. Stack, another term that he said to me that really resonates is this vaccine is a modern miracle. It is one of the most effective vaccines that's ever been produced, especially at the time and that it was introduced. And all the devastation and death that we're seeing is an entirely preventable crisis, entirely preventable. And so we've got to keep emphasizing the importance of vaccination going forward. I really appreciate your statements to that effect as well. And thank you for the work that you and all of folks in our medical community are doing to try and get people through this. We are really grateful for you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Glass. And there is no doubt this is a pandemic among unvaccinated. We have over 90% of folks, they are not vaccinated in hospital. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Babar. Any other questions or comments for Commissioner Glass?
Mr. Chair, just one statement. I would be remiss if I didn't say this. The commissioner and I, great working relationship. And truly, when we talk about things, we look at solutions. We don't really think about backfilling as much as we think about front filling. I mean, the idea of what can we be? And I look forward to the summit, but what can we be is the important question that we both ask. I appreciate the resources that the commissioner has received in his office to help us to do this work. I just wanted to just personally say, Jason, thanks for being our partner in this process.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson. And likewise, it's a delight to work with you and the talented team that you've got at CPE.
I'll make a quick comment.
Sure.
Commissioner Glass, this is Vidya. I have a student at JCPS. Not a single day goes by when we don't get notification of yet another one or multiple cases in one of the JCPS schools. I'm sure every parent is getting these notifications. So, you know, I understand how constrained you are in terms of being able to make some decisions and determinations, because there's, you know, obviously some other restrictions in place that don't allow you to make specific recommendations and decisions. But one of the things that, you know, as a parent that I notice is when a student is home and they're not in class, not having the ability for them to participate in classroom work remotely is really hindering their ability to keep learning, because yes, they have work that they continue to do at home. The teachers are assigning, teachers are doing a yeoman's job, just trying to keep everybody on track. I cannot begin to tell you what they're just doing spectacular work, just trying to keep it all together and keep all the students on track with learning. But I'm not really sure that, you know, if there's an ability for students that are remote, that have been quarantined, to participate in the same things that are happening in the classroom, they're not going to fall behind. There's going to be the opportunity to, at least to some degree, keep the level of learning, but not having that option, you know, from a technology standpoint, I know this is feasible because we've done NTI, we did it for, you know, over a year. So all those things are available, but, you know, it's just a comment that that would really go a long way in real, even if we don't have NTI, but the ability for hybrid learning would really go a long way in terms of keeping the students from falling behind. And we know how easily students can get behind when they're not in a classroom setting. Thank you so much for what you're doing.
Thank you. And I really appreciate that statement and acknowledgement that our educators and the students and the families are all working really hard. I think that the bill that was passed with all of its flaws that I mentioned, it will provide some more flexibility, because what we had in place was the district really was forced to either switch to NTI at the whole district level. And as I mentioned, they were really concerned about using those days, knowing that we've still got Kentucky winter and spring ice storms ahead. They were forced with doing that or stopping instruction completely. Those were really the two choices that they have. So they have some more options now. They can continue remote instruction for students that are quarantined, and they can do that at the building, at the grade, or even at the individual classroom level. So there's more options. I hope that that this bill has provided them the flexibility they need. We did recommend allowing for the hybrid structure. The legislature did not act on that, so that's not a path that's available. There is a limited circumstance that a district could put that in using a performance-based funding model that existed previously, and we provided guidance on that. But it's only for students 5th grade through 12th grade, and students have to opt into that. So really there's some significant limitations on that pathway. Again, we would have preferred more flexibility, more options, but we got what we got, and we're gonna take that and continue to work with it. I think that one of the what we saw over this past year and a half, that we hope that we would all be through this, is on the one hand, the capacity of using technology to deliver instruction and how things can happen asynchronously and at home and all over the place. Learning can keep going. And at the same time, we saw the limitations of that, that it is not a replacement for the in-person experiences and the relationships and the connection. So we hope to be working through our recovery now. Right now, we're working through our disruption still. And I don't want to say that that's all been negative. I think our students and our staff members are building some capacities and learnings around independent work, executive function, being able to manage their own time, that are some positives that will impact our students and staff going forward. But make no mistake, we will have a lot of work to do as soon as we can get clear of COVID, and we all have to work and do that as quickly as we can.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Glass. Appreciate all your work and the, as always, useful information. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Folks, we're going to take a brief 5-minute break. I would recommend please mute your microphones and turn your cameras off. And we will be back at 11:50 a.m. Thank you all very much. Okay, welcome back, everyone. I'll wait to see more cameras pop on before we get started. And as Heather mentioned, the cameras will need to be on for the vote that is coming up. Give everybody another minute. There we go. All right, welcome back, everyone. Myself and my dog both appreciated that 5-minute break that was needed. So welcome back. Next topic on the agenda is the executive committee reports. The executive committee met on August 18th and again this morning. We didn't have any actions to recommend today. However, we heard updates on the work from the Commonwealth Education Continuum. That's a tremendous amount of work going on, very, very good work. And I believe we're going to hear they're going to be presenting to the council later this year at the November meeting. So we'll hear more information on what's coming from there in the November meeting. So moving on, next topic is the ASI committee. Lori Harper, as the chair of the Academic and Strategic Initiatives Committee, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. The Academic and Strategic Initiatives Committee met 3 times since our last council meeting, and you can find a report of those activities in your materials. Much of our time has been spent on the development of the statewide strategic agenda. And I'm pleased to announce that much progress has been made and that we have a draft of the major components to share today. I'm going to ask Lee to update you about the work in a few minutes. But first, I want to present 3 new academic programs for the council to approve. These 3 programs were reviewed by the ASI committee on August 31st. Just as a reminder, the new academic program review process begins with the staff doing a deep review of the proposals before bringing them to the committee. Only those they recommend be approved move on to this process. A number of the documents on each program are provided, including the full proposal, a list of coursework, and any feedback other campuses may have provided during the development process. A campus representative then attends our meeting and presents the program and answers any question that the committee may have. So today, the 3 new programs being recommended for approval went through this process. Heather has them displayed on the screen and I'll read them for the record. From Northern Kentucky University, a bachelor's in arts in education, culture, and society, and a master's of science in cybersecurity. And from Western Kentucky University, a bachelor of arts in legal studies. The program summaries for each program are in your materials, and you can access all the related documents from our August 31st board materials. Did anyone have any questions on these programs? Hearing none, Mr. Chair, I have some other things to present, but would you like to have the council take action on these programs at this time?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Harper, very much. So Lori has presented the ASI committee's recommendation to approve 3 new academic programs. That recommendation serves as the motion and a second is not needed. Are there any questions before I take the vote? Okay, hearing none, all in favor of approving as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign? All right, motion passes. Thank you. Lori, I'll turn it back over to you for the rest of the ASI report.
Thank you. As I mentioned before, great progress has been made on the development of the statewide agenda. Over the last 8 months, staff have concluded a comprehensive environmental scan, worked with hundreds of constituents and stakeholders, and held many meetings with campus officials and state leaders. We have included the agenda framework in your board materials for you to review. The ASI committee is going to continue to work over the next 6 weeks and will bring a final strategic agenda to the board for approval at the November CPE meeting. Now I'm going to turn it over to Lee Nimitz to provide the board with a brief update on our work to date.
Thank you, Chair Harper, and good morning, everybody. Well, almost afternoon.
We wanted to give you a brief update, as Chair Harper mentioned, on the 2022-2030 strategic agenda development. Just as a reminder, the final plan will come to you at the next meeting for your consideration and approval. As Chair Harper mentioned, there has been a lot of work and a lot of progress that's been made over the past 7 or 8 months. We've included, as she mentioned, the draft framework for the agenda in your meeting materials. So it includes a lot more detail than I'll be discussing today, but I'm happy to respond to any questions that you might have about that document. So a lot of our work this spring and into the early summer was information gathering and data review. All told, we did 34 one-on-one interviews with legislators, campus presidents, other government leaders, and a lot of national higher education experts. We did a number of 2-hour focus group sessions with specific groups like our provosts, and we had focus group sessions with professionals with expertise in similar subject areas. For example, we had a session with folks who had expertise in adult learning, and another session in college affordability and college financing. So a lot of good information came out of those focus group sessions. We, of course, had board and committee discussions, and we've done a ton of data review and analysis. So I really bring all this up just to remind folks that this agenda has not been developed in a vacuum. We spent a lot of time and energy getting really what we hope are the best thinkers around the table to determine the future of Kentucky's post-secondary agenda. Next slide, please. So this is just a visual that gives a clearer sense of the strategic agenda structure. Just to give you a sense about where the ASI committee is in their deliberations. So it has developed and approved the first 4 levels of this agenda. So mission, vision, and value, the overarching goals, the strategic priority areas, and the objectives that will drive the work of the agenda. And over the next month, the committee will take action on state level strategies and performance measures. Next slide, please. So this slide really gives you sort of a short and sweet overview of where the agenda is in terms of its high level. The ASI committee will be recommending to the full board that Kentucky's current 60 by 30 educational attainment goal. So that's the goal that by 2030, at least 60% of the population will have a post-secondary degree or credential. So the recommendation is going to be that CPE continue that as the overarching goal of the new agenda. We know that increasing educational attainment levels in Kentucky will be one of the best strategies the state can employ to grow our economy and strengthen our workforce and really improve opportunity for more citizens. And so I think there is strong consensus that we keep this goal in place. The committee will also be recommending a comprehensive and deep focus on equity, making sure that our post-secondary system really does everything it can do to ensure all learners who have historically been left behind have clear pathways to success and support for a successful outcome. The committee considered having this as one of the standalone priority areas, but ultimately felt like this had to be part of every objective and strategy in the agenda. So that's why it's being pulled out as a cross-cutting priority. So in addition to the overall attainment goal and the cross-cutting equity priority, the agenda will focus on 5 high-level strategic priority areas. So the first is affordability. The issue of affordability as a prominent theme and concern really came up in almost every interview and focus group session we had. Whether the affordability barriers are perceived or they're real, the research that we did and a lot of other research shows that this is really the major barrier to enrollment and in many ways to completion. So affordability is also, of course, an equity issue. It's about how well we are communicating, how well we're advising students. It speaks to the need to help students gain early post-secondary opportunities like dual credit. It's about the council's responsibility in monitoring and moderating tuition and fee increases. And it's also about making need-based financial aid as targeted and expansive as possible. So that's the first strategic area, college affordability. The second area is transitions. So this priority area is all about the need to respond to strengthening and streamlining key transition points for students. Commissioner Glass talked about this quite a bit, particularly between K-12 and post-secondary, but as well, we want to look at transitioning and transitions for adults who make the decision to enter post-secondary programs. We know Kentucky has seen a steady decline of the on to college rate in recent years. We've shared that information regularly with this group. And we've also shared that in recent years, the number of adult learners attending post-secondary education has dropped significantly. So all these transition indicators are amplified even more by the pandemic and some of the challenges related to that. So, we are ramping up this work. We've talked about the Commonwealth Continuum today and all that's going on in that area, but we know more has to be done. And so that's why we put this front and center as one of the 5 areas of the agenda. The next area is student success. Student success has been at the heart of our strategic agendas for years, and it's still really the core mission of CPE's work. We are seeing graduation rates and completion rates increasing, and we're seeing the numbers of students graduating going up. But we're really not where we need to be in terms of getting our students to the finish line, and particularly in some of our demographic groups, our low income, our minority, adult and underprepared students, and in some areas of the state, this is an increasing challenge. So this goal captures a lot of our work and focus to improve our work with adult learners and the quality and effectiveness of academic programs. The fourth area we'll be focusing on is about ensuring, it's really focused on talent. We're calling it talent. It's ensuring a stronger link between the work of post-secondary education and the state's workforce and economic development needs. So it's about creating strong alignment between academic programs and what is needed in the workforce. But it's also helping guide students on a career path that makes sense for them, reaching them early with career counseling. And it's also about capitalizing on the talent on our campuses, our research and our teaching and our administrative talent, really to help our communities and businesses and industry and regions grow and thrive. So that's what we'll be capturing in this area of the agenda. And then finally, value. This area is all about helping shift and improve public and decision maker perceptions and understanding about higher education. It's really about communicating the value of post-secondary to prospective students and families, to community and business leaders, to decision makers. And it's about engaging the public in a conversation about college and its return on investment. And we'll be talking more about ROI in just a second. It's also about being transparent about what college costs and how much debt a student is going to get into and other issues of concern to the general public. So President Thompson, as you know, has been a leader in this work through his commitment to outreach and communications through the Higher Education Matters campaign. And his willingness to really engage deeply in this work, but we know there is a lot more to be done, and it can't simply be done by CPE. So a lot of this work will be around building a collaborative approach to communicating this value proposition and the importance of post-secondary education in Kentucky. I'm going to jump through the rest of these slides very quickly. I know we're on a short timeline. Heather, if you could hit slide 5. So this is really just taking the 5 key areas of the strategic agenda and breaking these out even further to the specific objectives that will drive this work. So I'm not going to read through these. You have the agenda framework. The agenda framework lists not only the objectives that have been approved by the ASI committee, but also draft state level strategies that the ASI committee will be considering over the next month. So Heather, if you'll jump to the next slide. Let's see. Okay, so that's the last two areas of the agenda. And then the next slide. So just quickly, a couple of comments about the timeline. So for the next 2 months, really the next 6 weeks, September and October, the ASI committee will be finalizing state strategies and the key performance indicators. We're also working with the campus advisory committee to do that. And then we're also working here to draft the agenda narrative. So that will be the basis of the document. November and December, we will bring the draft agenda to the board for approval at the November 5th meeting, as I mentioned. Then we'll be working throughout the rest of the year to produce the actual document and disseminate the agenda around the state and communicate it. And then as we move into the winter, this is when we will spend some additional time with the campuses, finalizing the targets that each campus will be developing to meet KPI goals. They will also be developing campus level strategies that align with the strategic agenda objectives. And then here at CPE, we will be developing and finalizing more detailed implementation strategies, timelines, and ownership of the various tactics and action steps. And the final slide, Heather. So this is just sort of a schematic or a visual of how we propose to do the planning and review cycle of this agenda. This is a long agenda. It's going to go out to 2030. So we really want to look at it in sort of 3-year cycles. So in each 3-year cycle, we will be developing action plans around each of the objectives and strategies. There will be regular assessments of progress on an annual basis. And then every 3 years will be a detailed review of objectives, strategies, and metrics. So the first review will take place in the fall of 2024. And then we'll repeat that through the end of this agenda cycle. So that is my very short update about the agenda. Things are going well. I can't tell you how much I appreciate the work of many of you on the ASI committee, and certainly the staff and campus contributions. This has been a very collaborative work, and I think going very well. Happy to answer any questions, either at this meeting or happy to talk to you offline if you would like to do that.
I will say, in the interest of time, we may hold off on questions at this point. And we can, if anybody does have any questions, you can send those on, or we can catch up in the next meeting. But thank you, Lee, very much. Great work. Ms. Harper, back to you.
Thank you very much. And I do appreciate Lee and the team there at CPE have done a great job. I know the committee has spent time, a lot of time working through it, but really behind the scenes, the team at CPE is working hard. So moving on. So at our last ASI meeting, committee members received a preview of our newest return on investment report that is being rolled out today. I'm going to turn it back over to Travis Muncie to discuss the report and introduce our presenters.
Thank you, Lori, and thank you to the entire council for giving us the opportunity to present these key findings from our early economic return on higher education investment report. You know, I think it's in this report, and as you'll see as we go through the slides, you know, it's evident we really focused on the student this time. You know, and I think that it's very timely with both our Higher Education Matters campaign and also our, you know, our overall focus on affordability with planning out the new strategic agenda. So with that said, I will be presenting today with Dr. Grace Dye, who was the main researcher on this report. And, you know, we'll split up the slides and then go through, you know, the different parts of the report. So, but I also want to, you know, thank our partners. We did this report in collaboration with the Kentucky Center on Statistics, or KY Stats, you know, who is always a great partner. And, you know, they did a great job in supporting the effort in creating this report. And also Melissa Young, you know, who was the the main writer on the report, and also created this great PowerPoint for the presentation. So I wanted to make sure that, we recognize both the partnership with KY Stats and the work that Melissa put into the final report. So with that said, if we can go ahead and get started. So really, when you take a step back and say, what is this report? What did we do? How is it different? And I think Dr. Thompson did a great job initially kind of, saying why this report is different, because, it's based on real data. It's based on an actual graduating class. And we followed that graduating class through their post-secondary careers and then on to their early workforce careers. So the cohort in general, so we had 43,655 Kentucky high school graduates in 2011, and that is from, public Kentucky high schools. And so that's the main cohort that we used for research. And then, like I said, we followed them through their post-secondary and on to their early workforce careers. Next slide, please. So, what did that cohort look like? So just, a basic demographic breakdown of the cohort itself, it looked a lot like Kentucky. So, the gender breakdown was very close to 50-50, 49.8 female students and then 50.2 male students. And then as far as race and ethnicity, that's also true. 80.5% of the graduating class was white, 9.6% Black, 5.6% Latinx, and then 4.3% other, and that would include, 2 or more races and other categories. As far as income, it was split into low income and non-low income. So just some background, we determined low income status based on eligibility for free or reduced lunch. So with that in mind, the income split was 55.3% of that graduating class was considered non-low income, and 44.7% were considered low income. And then, as you know, that is a very large proportion. And, Kentucky does have a large proportion of low income students. As far as where students were from, 54% of the students were from urban areas and 46% from rural areas. So like I said, just to give you a good idea of, who we followed and basically what the breakdown of those demographics are. Next slide, please. So of that graduating class, almost 61% attended a college directly from high school. So that was both in-state and out-of-state. And also of that cohort, 55.5% attended a Kentucky public or IQ institution, which would be a private four-year institution. And of those, 36.2 completed a credential. And as you can see, of the breakdown of what students did once they graduated, 26.4% no college. And you can also see with the 37.4% some college and 36.2% earned a college credential, that's pretty evenly split. Of students who earned a college degree and students who earned some college but eventually dropped out. Next slide, please. So then we get into the cost of college. And just real quick, this presentation is going to be broken up in 4 main parts. So we have the cost of college, loan debt of those students, the earnings after graduation, and then economic mobility. And this is the cost section. So as you can see here, we have it split up into the median cost of attendance, the median grants and scholarships, median net cost, and then that percentage that's actually funded by some sort of aid. And we also have it split up into the credential level, with whether a student received whether a student earned a credential or diploma, an associate's degree, a baccalaureate degree at 4, 5, or 6 years. And, the big thing that jumps out here is the diminishing proportion or percentage that aid actually funds of the cost of attendance as the baccalaureate, as students stay in college for that 5th or 6th year for a baccalaureate degree. As you see, the sweet spot at 4 years with a bachelor's degree, 34% of that of the cost of attendance is covered by some sort of financial aid, and that goes down to 19%, once that student gets to the 6th year. And that could be things like, diminishing institutional aid, or, things like the CAP grant running out, some things of that nature. But yeah, as you see, as students stay in school longer, a smaller proportion of their overall cost of attendance is covered by some sort of financial aid. And as you can see here, the cost of attendance, that's going to be both the direct and indirect cost to attend a post-secondary institution. That would include direct costs like tuition, fees, and then indirect costs like, travel and stuff of that nature. So that would include both indirect and direct costs. Next slide, please. But some good news, and something we kind of expected, was low-income students did have a higher proportion of their cost of attendance covered by financial aid, and that was almost to be expected, just because, low-income students would be eligible for things like the Pell Grant and the CAP grant, but that's also good news. So, we do know that low-income students are receiving more aid when they need it, over non-low-income students. And as you'll see here, a significantly higher proportion of the cost of post-secondary education, a much higher proportion for low-income students. And you'll see that's actually true across the board. But really, the biggest differences are in that associate degree level and that 4-year baccalaureate degree level, where 58% and 54% of that cost of attendance is covered by some sort of financial aid. Next slide, please. Okay, and with that said, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Grace Dye, who will go over both debt, earnings, and economic mobility. So Grace, if you want to take over.
Thank you, Travis. So before we go to the accumulated loan debts and monthly loan repayment, let's take a look at the profile of the borrowers. So in this study, borrowers are students who took out at least one student loan over the course of their studies, such as federal subsidized loans, federal unsubsidized loans, institutional loans, or loans from other private lenders. So from this slide, we can see that just over half, 52.9% of in-state college students in this cohort took out loans to finance their education. In addition, we found the borrowers, in comparison to non-borrowers, were more likely to be female, from a low-income family, and from an underrepresented minority group. So among Kentucky credential completers, nearly 60% of bachelor graduates and 57% of associate graduates took out student loans. So the table in the next slide presents you the median loan balances by credential level for all students, low-income students, and non-low-income students. And the numbers here include an estimate of loan interest accrued. So we found that low-income student loan debt is typically the same as or less than non-low-income students' loan debt. At the baccalaureate level, students had comparable levels of debt regardless of income status. However, low-income associate degree earners had a median loan amount of $4,358, about half as much as non-low-income associate degree earners. So what does those total amounts mean practically for those credential earners, and what can they expect to pay each month? So next slide presents you the monthly loan repayment by credential level. So we calculated the amortized loan payment over a 10-year term, also taking into consideration each loan repayment capped at 10% of person's income. So the monthly payments shown here in this slide are the payments in 2019. So we can see that the typical 3-year associate earners has a $90 monthly loan payment, while the 6-year bachelor's earners have $352 monthly payment. So next slide presents you the cohort's annual earnings by credential level from 2011 to 2019. It includes all wages, such as wages earned while enrolled in post-secondary. So the blue dotted line here represents the annual earnings of those who only have a high school diploma without any post-secondary enrollment. And we used it as a reference group here. And you can see those students began in 2011 with earnings above all other groups. As time goes on, each line has a place where it jumps up. So the purple line here represents for the annual earnings of 3-year associate degree earners. And the purple line jumps up in 2014, which is about the time when they completed their associate degree. And the yellow line here represents the annual earnings of those who earned their bachelor's degree in 4 years. And they go from almost the lowest earnings in 2014 to the highest earnings in 2016, which is a year after their graduation. Similar results for 5-year and 6 years bachelor's degree earners, their earnings jumped 1 year after graduation. And going all the way to 2019, 8 years after high school graduation, 4-year bachelors earned the highest wages and followed by 5-year bachelors and 3-year associates. At the bottom are those with only a high school diploma and some college enrollment without a credential. So over time, we see the gap in earnings between high school and college graduates grows even wider. Now I'm going to take the previous 2 topics, loans and wages, together to talk about affordability of each credential. So for so many years, people have debated the question of what level of loan debt should be considered affordable and reasonable. So debt to income analysis, which is a ratio of total loan debts to the borrower's annual entry level earnings, has been used as an important method of assessing borrowers' ability to repay their loan debts. According to previous studies, if the debt to income ratio is less than 1, then it's considered affordable. So by affordable, we mean that borrowers should be able to repay their student loan debt in 10 years or less. So from this graph, we can see for students who completed their post-secondary certificate, diploma, and associate degree within 3 years, and students who earn a bachelor's degree in 4 years, their total loan debts seem to be affordable as their debt to income ratios are lower than 1. On the other hand, the debt to income ratios for 5-year, 6-year bachelor's degree exceeded 1, placing them at greater risk of loan default earlier in their career. One note that I want to emphasize here is that affordability for this study is assessed at the early stage of career as we use entry-level earnings, which is the earnings 1 year after graduation for each of those credential levels. So if we are able to use earnings 3 years or 5 years after graduation, the findings might be different. And we do hope to examine that part as we have more years of earnings for this cohort. So the next slide presents a key finding from the economic mobility part of this report. So we used students' 2019 annual earnings to look at their economic mobility in comparison to their previous family income level. In this sample, 31,615 is the 50th percentile of the 2019 annual earnings. So for the earnings that is above 31,615, we consider it in a higher percentile. So from this graph, we see that the percent of students previously from low-income families who have a 2019 annual earnings in a higher percentile is smaller than that of non-low-income students across almost all credential levels. However, the gap between low-income students and non-low-income students decreased from certificate diploma to associate and from associate to bachelor's degree. If we look at the low-income students separately, we can see that the percent of low-income students with the 2019 annual earnings that is in a higher percentile increased as the educational attainment increased, ranging from about 41% for high school to about 72% for a 5-year bachelor's degree. So the findings from this graph that I've just talked about indicate the contribution of higher education to the upward economic mobility, especially for students from low-income families. So those are all the highlights from this report that we are planning to share with you all. Thank you all for listening, and let us know if there's any question.
Thank you, Travis. Thank you, Grace. I'm very much like this information. In fact, I'd like to set up some time where we can kind of geek out on some data together. So I reached out to Lee. We'll get that set up. And for folks in the matter of time, we're not going to take any questions because we have a meeting starting here in about 30 minutes. So I appreciate it. And if you guys do have any questions, please let us know. We can route that to Travis and Grace and get that answered for you. Okay.
That concludes the ASI report. So I'll turn it back to you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Next on the agenda is the Finance Committee report. The Finance Committee met on September 2nd. Our discussion focused the data presented at 2 recent legislative testimonies, and we also received a COVID-related campus finance update that included the federal awards received as compared to the related cost and foregone revenues. We also discussed the development of the biennial budget request that we presented for formal approval at our next council meeting. President Thompson discussed this earlier, so I won't go into any details, but I will remind you that 2 tables presented at our meeting with the drafted numbers have been included in today's material for your review. Please review that before the next meeting. As I said, we won't be taking any questions in respect of time, but if you do have any questions, please let us know and we'll get those answered. Next on the agenda is the campus good news reports. Several campuses have provided written reports in your materials, so please review those if you haven't already. There's actually a lot of really good stuff going on. I recommend taking a look at that. Next up is other council business. Before we close out today, we have 2 items left on our agenda. First, I'd like to appoint Elaine Walker to the Finance Committee to fulfill the term ending June 30th, 2023 and left vacant by Doris Thompson. Second, oh, you're very welcome. Welcome to the committee. Second, as you all know, Christy Nelson submitted her resignation to the board effective September 1st. She served on CPE for 4 years, was active on multiple committees, and had strong dedication to ensuring our campuses remained affordable and equitable. The company she works for has recently undergone some changes, which is demanding much more of her time. So we are very sorry to lose her. She has drafted a resolution, or staff has drafted a resolution, which is included in your materials. Please, if you haven't reviewed them, please do. And is there a motion for its approval?
So move.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion passes. Thank you very much. Does anyone have anything additional they would like to address before we adjourn today? Okay. Our next council meeting is scheduled for November 4th and 5th, and currently is slated to take place in Transylvania University here in Lexington, Kentucky. If for some reason the COVID transmission rate hasn't improved by then, Heather will be in touch with alternative plans. The AGB Gartner Governing Board Equity on Student Success Academy will begin at 1 p.m. today, so in about 30 minutes. If you registered for that, you should have received a link via email. If not, you can ask Heather to resend that. Okay. And before I wrap it up, any other questions, comments? Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Yes.
Dr. Seth, thanks very much. All in favor, you can signify by leaving the meeting.
Adios.
Good to see everybody.
Good to see everyone.
Be safe.